All right, welcome back to the Baseball Show right here on Nickel Press TV. I'm Andrew Singleton, joined as always by Ralph Lifshitz. We're here to talk some fantasy baseball, give you some of our analysis and things that we like or dislike about players. We want to thank everybody who's been tuning in, checking out these episodes. We hopefully think you've been finding them enjoyable, and we hope we're right in that assessment. You can check out the player library if you're unfamiliar with that. It's a playlist we have here on the channel where we've isolated each player we've covered individually on their own, alphabetized. So you can scroll through and just look for the player that you're interested in and see what we have to say about them. So far, we've covered 57 players, and we're going to add another 3 to that today when we discuss 3 hitters that we think you should be either having second thoughts on or not feeling strongly enough about heading into the 2017 season. So, with that being said, sit back, relax, enjoy these 3 hitters we have to discuss. And if you're not, why don't you click the subscribe button right now so you don't have to worry about it later. All right, good enough. Let's go. Charlie Blackmon. Dude, am I insane? Are we insane? Am I missing something? Is this really the 4th best outfielder in fantasy baseball? Really? I love the jump in power since he turned 27 and kind of reached that power prime peak of his career. But last year literally made no sense just in how he got from, being a low 20s hitter to 29 home runs in just 143 games. And even with those 29 home runs, he still only drove in 82. Ralph, didn't everybody hit 20 home runs in 2016?
Yeah, Freddie Galvis hit 20 home runs.
Yeah, Didi Gregorius hit 20 home runs. Charlie Blackmon is not, I repeat, N-O-T, not a 30-dinger a year guy. His numbers, especially the power ones, aren't necessarily Coors inflated. But if you look at his home-away splits, they're nearly identical. However, his average is the one that severely benefits from Coors Field. So the power, the other counting stats, not necessarily a big jump one way or the other, but the average jumps from like a 290 to over a 300 hitter. In fact, he hit 324 in 2016. My question to you is, if the steals remain in the 20 or below range, and he is a 300 hitter as opposed to a 324 guy, do you still see him as a top 15 overall player in fantasy baseball?
No. Top 15, I think it's a little too rich for my blood. I'm always questioning when I look at his numbers at the end of the year, if he's somebody that I severely underrate as a player. Maybe I'm overlooking him because he's a Blackmon, Blackmon Lives Matter, hashtag, all that sort of stuff. And you look at what he's done over the last 2 seasons. I've owned him nowhere. I probably have like 25 teams. I've owned Blackmon nowhere. And but you look across the board. I mean, the guy had 43 steals back in 2015. He follows that up last year with 29 homers. So which guy is he? Is he the guy that's stealing 43 bases? Is he the guy that's hitting 29, 30 bombs? There are some things that we do know about Blackmon. He has an elite line drive rate, 27.8% line drive rate. That's next level sort of line drive rate. That's amongst the highest in all of baseball. So he makes hard contact. He plays in Coors. So I think the batting average is always going to stay high. He was pulling the ball a little bit more last year. I wonder if he was selling out a little bit more for power. Maybe he's slowing down as he gets a little bit older. But across the board, the production's been really good. He's somebody that if he was at the end of round 2, beginning of round 3, I'd be more than comfortable taking him. If he's 14, 15, 16, it's a little bit too rich for my blood. I do see him as a player that could have a 300 batting average next year. Very good counting stats, hitting at the top of a good Rockies lineup. With a 20 homer, 20 steal upside. I don't think he's a 43 steal guy that he was in 2015. I don't think he's a 29 homer guy that he was in 2016. I think it's somewhere in the middle. The one problem with Blackmon is if he gets dealt, good luck.
Yeah, and you mentioned if he gets dealt, he's a prime trade candidate. The Rockies have Ramel Tapia knocking at the door. David Dahl's already gotten a cup of coffee. They're trying to figure out what to do with Cargo. They got Blackmon. Do you remember a couple of years ago when Blackmon and Corey Dickerson were like neck and neck for who was going to be that secondary outfielder that everybody wanted in fantasy? Obviously, Blackmon's been a little bit more consistent, but how much of that has to do with Dickerson being let go from Colorado and not having the benefit of Coors anymore? I mean, as we mentioned, it's not necessarily all Coors driven for Charlie Blackmon, but he's more of like a 290 hitter, 20-20 guy. I think you can get 90 or 100 runs. So, if that's the category you're targeting, great. But if you're looking at him as a 40 steals guy, I think those, days behind him, he did deal with the plantar fasciitis or whatever it was, that hobbled him and slowed him down, which kind of to his benefit, shows his character and his grit that, he still, managed to get 143 games in. But I don't think he's a 40 plus steals guy. I think he's more in that 20, maybe 25 range. And the same thing with the homers. So, we're looking at NFBC ADP data where he's the 16th player overall, fourth outfielder off the board. Too rich for my blood. You take Blackmon, and I'll gladly wait for the next guy that we're going to jump into right now, Mr. Former MVP. Plum to the locks. We're talking about Andrew McCutchen, who has dropped all the way down to the 18th outfielder off the board, 67th player overall. I mentioned Plum to the locks, one of the best ESPN SportsCenter commercials ever. Yeah, what else can I say about that? You might notice the misspelling of McCutchen's name in these graphics here with the unnecessary O. There is no O in the spelling of McCutchen. As much as I'd like to say that was intentional, it was really just me. And I didn't want to take the time to go back and fix it. So let's just leave the O there, and let's call it an O for overreaction. I love when people overreact to one down year for a superstar player. I didn't say a star player. I said a superstar player. That's what McCutchen has been. I know people look at him as being old or whatever. He's the same age as Charlie Blackmon, damn it. They're both 30 years old. How is McCutchen old, but Charlie Blackmon's the fourth best outfielder in baseball? I really don't get it. I understand. 2016, you paid up for McCutchen. He let you down. You got a sour taste in your mouth. But he's giving you an opportunity to allow him to pay you back for that mistake last year by being drafted so low for what he could be worth. Ralph, am I missing the point here?
I think you might be. I think that O in McCutchen is for Andy's O face because he loves McCutchen. Yeah, he's 30, man. The speed is gone. I think the days as a perennial MVP candidate are certainly behind him. But where he's getting drafted, he can certainly help you in a multitude of categories, particularly counting stats. He's still going to hit homers. I think he had, 24, 25 homers last year. I wouldn't be shocked if he starts to, change his approach a little bit more, get a little bit more power happy. In turn, that may continue to tank his average. I don't think he's going to be much below 250, but I think he's probably more of a 270 hitter now than the 300 guy that he was. But we'll see. I know that he was dealing with a knee injury in 2015. I think there were some lingering effects that held over into 2016, especially early on. If you look at his numbers in the last 2 months of the season, he really started to rake. I think the OPS was, in the high nines. I have to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure when I was doing my show notes that was the case. And he's a guy that still makes, a solid amount of hard contact. Wasn't really all that hurt throughout the season. He had a thumb issue, a little heel issue, but I think it could be lingering effects of the knee issue. I think the days of this guy stealing double-digit steals, at least 15 or so, are probably long gone. But if you got a 270 hitter with 25 homers, 80 to 90 runs, 80 to 90 RBIs, and a handful of steals, that's really not all that bad in the sixth round. I don't see him tanking. I don't see his career totally falling off the map. I still think there's a good offensive player there.
Yeah, so you mentioned the stolen bases. He was all the way down to 6 last year. I mean, the general consensus is that Kutch's 2016 season was deplorable, and he's on the decline, as I mentioned. He's basically washed up, but he still finished the year as a top 30 outfielder. He turned in his 6th straight 20-plus home run season. He still drove in runs. He still scored them. The only real huge difference other than the stolen bases was the batting average. The last time he had a down year like that with the batting average was in 2011. And he followed that season up with the best season of his life. In fact, 2012 was statistically better than 2013 when he won the MVP. My point is he's a career 290 hitter. He's had one bad season where he hit in the 250s, such as he did in 2016. He's proven he can bounce back from that. So if we're looking at a 290 hitter who gets you 20-plus home runs, has the potential to steal 20, and I think he's likely to get back up into the teens, drives in, 90-plus runs and can score 90-plus runs, aren't we basically looking at the same guy we just discussed a minute ago in Charlie Blackmon? Charlie Blackmon is being drafted as the 4th outfielder. Andrew McCutchen is being drafted as the 18th outfielder. You're getting nearly the same production for the same age player. I don't understand where the disdain is coming from with Andrew McCutchen. I don't necessarily want to say it's an O-face. Like, I love him. I just love the value he's providing. So unless you have anything to say I'm wrong for everything I just spouted and we're going to move on. But I think you'd be doing yourself a favor if you targeted Andrew McCutchen. And you're going to get him as like your second or third outfielder at the rate he's going. So think about that for a minute. Let's move on. We're going to talk about another catcher. We try to slide him and sneak him in here as we can. Not going to dedicate a whole show to catchers because people don't really love catchers the way Ralph loves Tom Murphy. But we have talked about Gary Sanchez. We have talked about Murphy. I believe we talked about Wilson Contreras. Today we're going to talk about JT Realmuto. The reason we're going to talk about Realmuto is because he's now moved up to the sixth catcher off the board, 112 overall. And a little backstory and why I liked Realmuto up until maybe a week or two ago is that other than being Puerto Rican and my life being surrounded by them, well, me not being Puerto Rican, I'm talking about Yadier, but other than Yadier and Molina being Puerto Rican and my life being surrounded by them, the reason Molina has been my favorite catcher has been the batting average. It's something you don't necessarily typically rely on for a catcher. I know there's your Buster Posies and I know there's the Lucroy Goodyears, et cetera, et cetera. But Realmuto has turned in a 300 average season at the catcher position. It's a lot to say maybe he's not a 300 hitter, but guess what? He is a 300 hitter. He did it. You can't take that away from him. Is he a repeatable 300 hitter? That is to be debated. And, you know, like I said, while they exist, not many everyday catchers are 300 hitters. He doesn't give you a lot of power. Maybe he'll get you 15 homers max. He's got potential to get you 20-plus steals. His career high is 18 when he was back at Double-A. You add all that up, that's a Jason Kendall type of player. Jason Kendall in his prime kind of guy, where he's going to give you a high batting average. He's going to contribute steals. He's going to give you a little bit of pop. And you can rely on him every day in your lineup. That's a starting catcher that you would love to have. I have him personally ranked as my fifth catcher, and I definitely think he's in the top 10. But as I mentioned, the reason I've kind of soured on him is because he wasn't going as the sixth catcher off the board a couple weeks ago. Now he is. Might be getting a little priced out at this point. So, you know, I'm still a little bullish on him, but I'd rather take him as the eighth or ninth catcher off the board as opposed to the sixth. And it might not sound like a huge difference, but we're talking a good 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 rounds in draft position.
Yeah, and with Realmuto, I mean, you know, obviously, as you mentioned, he's a great source of batting average and steals, especially from the catcher position. He was somebody that I owned in a lot of leagues last year because he was dropping outside of the top 10 at the position. But some of the issues that I see is with a little luck going, either good luck or bad luck, one way or the other, he could have a pretty, you know, pedestrian season, one that you probably don't want to target, especially as a sixth catcher overall. We could probably be taking pitchers, relievers, you know, hitters to fill out your lineup, you know, based on where he's going. I mean, he easily could have a 270 season with 8 homers and 6 steals, and that's just blah. I mean, you know, you can get that off of the waiver wire. I'm typically somebody that believes in Franken-catcher, where I more or less stream catchers based on what their matchup is on a week-to-week basis. But on the other side of the coin, his upside is, especially as a 25-year-old, he's still relatively young. He could be a 300 hitter with 15 homers, 15 steals, maybe even a little bit more in both of those categories. And, you know, that's a great season, particularly from a catcher. So, you know, Realmuto is the kind of guy that it depends on what the price tag is. If there are some leagues that I'm playing in where people just don't touch catchers and he drops the last 4 or 5 rounds, he's somebody I could see taking a shot on because of what the upside is. But buyer beware if you're buying him, you know, at the 6th overall, you know, catcher off the board price tag.
Yeah, and just to give you some perspective, 2 players being drafted, one right before and one right after, are Rick Porcello and Javier Baez. That's the kind of company JT Realmuto finds himself in now, and I don't think he's in that company. So you're better off at that point waiting on a catcher. As we've talked about Tom Murphy, Ralph loves him. You can get him much, much, much later. There's other guys going after Realmuto at this point. I think Yasmani Grandal is one of them. I'd rather, you know, I've talked negatively about him in some of the rankings you may have seen me post, but it's not because I don't like him. It's just because I don't think he plays enough games or will play enough games to maximize all the potential he has on a per-game average. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm passing on Realmuto at this point. While I loved him a couple weeks ago, I'm a pass now.
Pass.
So I think that's going to wrap it up. Those are 3 more hitters. for the 2017 fantasy baseball season. We want to thank you for watching the baseball show. We want to ask you, if you like this video, to slap the thumbs up on it, give us that like. If you didn't like it, don't put the thumbs down, just leave it in the comments. Tell us why you hate us or why you didn't like it. You can also leave your comments and show support. You can also leave your comments to tell us any funny anecdotal stories you might have that can relate to any of the players we discussed, or suggest players you want to hear us discuss in the future. If you're not already subscribed, please do that now. Thank you to the Reddit subscribers. Thank you to the Razzball community. That's going to do it. We'll see you next time with 3 prospects.